Bingo, 2 o'clock rock. This is Community Matters because they do. It does, both.
It does.
And that's Maryann Sasaki. She's with the law firm of Clay Chapman, Iwamura, Pulis, and Nervell. We're going to call it for this discussion, Clay Chapman.
Yes, do.
Welcome to the show, Maryann.
Thank you.
It's so nice to have you here. We met only a week ago, and I was so impressed that, I wanted to explore some more with you, especially about your background and how all the pieces come together for you here in Hawaii.
Okay.
Let's talk about your training in law.
Well, I went to Columbia undergrad, and I'm a graduate of the Harvard Law School. It was rigorous and excellent training. I didn't think when I went there that I'd end up here, but I have, and it's, fantastic.
Michener wrote a book, called Hawaii years ago.
I read it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I remember when it came out.
And it still teaches me today that there's 1,000 stories here.
Right.
And I have my story, you have your story, we all have stories. Some of us have indigenous stories, a lot of us have, come to these island stories, and that's what makes the place so interesting. So, how did you come?
Well, I'm from New York. I'm really from New York. I was born in Brooklyn, and I lived on...
I was born in Queens.
I know you were born in Queens.
Actually, Manhattan, but I lived in Queens, and Queens and Brooklyn are like joined at the hip, so I know you.
They are.
And so does Bernie Sanders. He knows you too.
Well, he's from not too far from where I grew up.
Okay.
He sounds exactly like all my relatives. So, I knew immediately where he was from. I was born in Brooklyn, and I lived most of my life in Manhattan, as is the aspiration of everybody in a borough of the city, right? And, but I met my husband about 15 years ago, and he's from here, and I had always entertained the idea of coming to live here, and I prevailed upon him, and we came. Really, that's the short story.
Great. And now you're practicing law.
I practice law, I practice corporate law, and as you know, medical marijuana dispensary law.
Well, that's the title of our show, and to get to it is the intersection of corporate and cannabis law. Corporate-cannabis, I guess.
Right.
They're joined in some way.
Well, it's a business. I mean, if
It's a
we look at
business.
it like a business, then it's easy to see why you need a lawyer.
So what's your background in corporate and what's your background in cannabis?
Do I really have to?
Be careful with that now.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. My background in corporate is, when I got out of the law school, I went to practice with a large law firm in New York City, and I learned the ropes there. And from there, I went to a mid-sized firm, and I did mergers, acquisitions, securities, corporate governance, well, things that sort of nobody wants.
That's a great way.
Nobody but a lawyer would be interested in, probably. I love it.
I got to tell you, I was in the tax program at NYU, and we had a teacher who taught us Section 301A1C, which is a certain kind of corporate merger under the Internal Revenue Code. Mm-hmm. And he was the most boring human being that I have ever known. And usually, as a matter of custom, the students applaud a teacher at the end of the semester, right? And in my life, they have always applauded the teacher at the end of the semester, except for this guy.
That's really
terrible.
That's pretty impressive.
Pretty impressive.
It is pretty, boring stuff. It's not. I mean, I find it interesting. I think the way the world works and the way business works is very interesting. And now with medical marijuana dispensaries, these are emergent businesses. So we're writing the rules as we go along. We don't know really how it's going to play out and what laws we're going to need, and even what kind of legal advice they're going to need. I can assume that they're going to need the standard legal advice, employment agreements and that kind of thing, but there's a tremendous component of compliance, which is,
And risk.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of new risks. I mean, for example, the banking issue.
Right, the banking issue is a big issue. And lest anyone thinks this is a settled matter of law, Chris Christie actually, during his campaign, said that if it was up to him and he became president, marijuana would once again become illegal. So
once again,
become illegal, right?
Illegal.
So he
That's
said
nice.
He said something like Colorado. Yeah, I hope you're enjoying yourself now because you won't be.
Cut you off.
Yeah, it's not like it's far from a done deal. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose you could actually make that analysis with the people who are running for office right now. I mean, if they, not only Christie, but maybe others,
Yeah,
would get into
yeah.
office and cut us off
I
from
think that
marijuana.
that's right. I mean, they'd nip the nascent
Demon.
industry in the bud, so to speak. Yeah, the problem is obviously it's still illegal under federal law, and it's a Schedule A drug, and so is heroin, and so is, you know, cocaine, and, you know, people are reluctant to change that.
Yeah. Well, in New York, you know, what's the situation in New York? Is it legal
It's
or illegal?
decriminalized in New York. I don't,
Yeah.
It just was, though. I didn't practice this sort of law, you know.
This is something came later.
Right,
That's
well,
what I
you
was
know,
getting at.
You know, I would jokingly say, oh, I'm going to Hawaii and become a pot lawyer, you know, like I'm going to relax and, you know. And I came to Hawaii and I became a pot lawyer. So.
You had all the equipment.
Yeah, it was just the, you know, the right time, because, you know, even now we're still in the waiting period to discover who are awarded those 8 licenses.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And it's not even clear who's going to be making the decision for that
No,
matter.
it's not. It's supposed to be transparent, and the names are supposed to be published, but they haven't been
They
yet.
haven't.
Have you seen them? No. I haven't.
No, and it's coming up. I think April 15th, the decision has to be made. My goodness, that's a month away as
I
well.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know why they chose tax day. That seemed to be unnecessarily cruel.
You really, good point.
I don't know why,
Yeah.
but yeah, my client is waiting with bated breath. They're a consortium of doctors, and we help them through the process, a very complicated process, whereby certain percentage of your investors have to be local, you know, Hawaiian citizens, as I suppose Hawaiian citizens are.
Yeah.
You have to go through thorough background checks, and you have to be well-financed. It's a complex procedure. It's like any other license, like a medical license or a law license.
Yeah, we're inventing a new industry, if you will,
Right.
really out of whole cloth. And so I guess you begin with the notion there's money, there's investment involved. In fact, Rob Robinson is organizing, he's a venture capital guy, an angel investor guy. He's organizing a fund. You could invest in the fund, and the fund would invest in the marijuana company.
I would, because it's a very lucrative business, and I must say that I support the legalization of marijuana. I don't think it's dangerous, and I think it's useful. There's so many studies that it's useful for post-traumatic stress syndrome, depression, insomnia. Like, my clients are doctors, and they take the medical aspect of it really seriously. And the way they envision their production facilities, almost like a laboratory, where it's, you know, completely sterile. They call it NASA grade, you know, laboratory.
Really?
Yeah. And because they want to make each dosage consistent with the next dosage. They really want to make it like medicine that a doctor can prescribe, and prescribe comfortably. So
we want to know the effects and the side effects. We want to know how much yields, you know, what
Right.
kind of result in what individual.
Right.
It's complicated, and when you say they want to make a lab out of it, I mean, we would expect nothing less. Why? Because we want them to experiment. We want them to learn about those rules of how much yields what result.
right,
you know.
because we want it to be medicine. We don't. One of the problems with the legalization of marijuana now in Hawaii, whereby you can grow your own pot, or I should say marijuana.
You can say whatever you want.
I know,
It's the
but
First Amendment.
Is that, you know, you grow your own, so the strength, it varies from, you know, time to time. People they get mold. They're not necessarily farmers, so it's a really inconsistent product. So.
Yeah. You know, it was something you said a minute ago. I want to dwell on it for a minute. You know, it's still federally on that
Illegal.
Schedule A.
Schedule A, yeah.
And you know, I've been observing that the way people feel about the federal government these days is not the way people used to feel about the federal government
So you have
before.
observed before that I can
Yeah.
recollect.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, I may have said this before. And I don't want it that way because I like the federal government. I'll go on record, I like the federal government. The federal government is us and we are them. And so it troubles me that people don't trust the federal government as much as they did before. To wit, the Apple versus IBM case and so many other things. And I really, wonder your thoughts about the sort of the conundrum here. The federal government has been dumping on marijuana for a long time, since it came up in the 60s, since it got popular, if you will. At the same time, now people entire states
I know.
are thumbing their nose at the federal
I know.
government. And the federal government is not picking up what people are saying in the states about they want to have this for not recreational, that'll come, but medical marijuana.
Right.
So what is happening here in terms of the relationship of the state and public opinion versus the federal government?
Well, I would preface my remarks by saying that you've convinced me to be a little more open-minded toward the federal government, to love the federal government a little more, because I'm very suspicious, and I think that the federal government is in our business, too much in our business, and they're not trustworthy. And then we had a discussion, and it really made me rethink my position, because you're right, the government is us, the government is the people, and so, would that it were more so, in my view. But well, the government has basically said we're going to turn a blind eye to this. The states have control of this. It's a medical issue, so there's no like federal medical legislation, and I mean there's the Food and Drug Administration, but so they. But it's a mess. It's just a mess, because they don't want to speak. The federal government doesn't want to speak. Therefore, the banks don't want to act because they don't want to be in violation of the federal government. Meanwhile, you have these businesses making inordinate amounts of money and not being able to file their taxes because you have to file electronically in some cases, but they don't have bank accounts from which to transfer funds. I mean, it's a mess. It's a quagmire. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But why is the federal government not responding to an obvious desire on the part of millions, may I say, millions of people in more than a handful of states now, it's a number of states now, who want to do this? Why is the federal government not responding? Why does the administration tell its attorney general to keep it on Schedule A? We're going to keep on pushing here. Is the federal government not being responsive? Is the federal government not listening? What is happening?
It's so slow to change. I mean, I really think a really good analogy is gay marriage. And what happened with gay marriage was that it was such a push and such a push and such a push. Then it reached a critical tipping point, and then it happened all at once. Yeah. Who said that? F. Scott Fitzgerald says that going bankrupt, it happens slowly and then all at once, which is what happens. And I think this is going to happen with marijuana as well. Enough states, they'll create a critical mass, and they won't be able to be ignored by the government anymore. Right now, this is just a really low burner item for the government. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with
the political forces in play. I mean, is there a constituency in this country that opposes any kind of legalization?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I'll tell you an anecdotal. I'm very proud to be, a founding member of the National Cannabis Bar Association. I'm very proud of my work. And I was at a club recently, and I was, discussing it, and it didn't even occur to me that it might be a topic not addressable over dinner. But somebody really took issue. A person really took issue with it, and they said, I think it's a really bad idea. I think it will lead to children doing drugs. I think it will lead to, increase in Mexican cartels. So there are people that they don't think it's a good idea and aren't neutral.
Right, and when I say constituency, I mean people who feel that way and who also have some influence in Washington.
I'm sure there are.
Who are keeping the government stuck on this issue.
Right. Well, I'm sure that the alcohol lobby, for example, and the cigarette lobby have a big interest in not having marijuana legalized. I mean, they sort of cornered the market on vices, and why would they want more competition? That's what I.
We have to limit vices to my vice.
Right.
Your vice is not permitted.
Right.
Let's take a moment for a break. I got to think about that. I got to get that in my brain.
But it's our vice. Alcohol, it's tried and true. We know it.
We're going to take a break. This is Community Matters, because they do. It does. Talking about the intersection of corporate and cannabis with Maryann Sasaki of Clay Chapman. You'll see. We're going to learn more. We're going to learn how to do it. We're going to learn some law now. We'll be right back.
Aloha, welcome to Think Tech Hawaii. My name is Josh Green. I'm the host of a program called Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm a physician. I work in the emergency department on the Big Island. I also serve in the state senate, which, please don't hold that against me, doesn't detract from my television program. We speak about all the big healthcare issues in the state. We get together on Tuesdays from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we try to talk about the most important issues in healthcare. This is a terrific venue for people to learn about healthcare. There are many programs on this station. We broadcast it later, not just on the internet, but also on OC16. Thanks for joining us. Please be informed healthcare consumers.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. I am Anu Hittel, and I host a show on climate change. It's called Climate Change Beyond Outrage. And in it, we go beyond outrage to look at solutions to global climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. Join me every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Hawaii Standard Time. Aloha, namaskar, and goodbye.
So we have a statute that is now going to allow medical marijuana. We're going to have some licensees selected on April 15th. We gotta get our heads around that. And part of the solution is to talk to lawyers who are actually doing the work. So I'm going to create for Maryann Sasaki a case study.
Okay.
Okay. I am a guy who applied for a license. So one of these days, the Department of Health will release the names of the people who's supposed to make that selection. I don't know why it takes so long. And on April 15th, and I'm not sure they can get an extension. That's in the law, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's going to be a decision. And let's say, happy, I win. I'm one of the 6 that are selected.
Well, it's going to be a tremendous amount of work for you, because chances are you haven't set up a corporate structure that's significant. Well, let's step back. Have you gotten land for the production facilities? So you have to get a certain amount of land, because what we have is called a vertical regime, which is that the owner owns the production facilities. They also own the retail outlets. There's actually legislation thinking of separating those, but right now it's a vertical regime. So you have to think about, okay, where am I going to put these massive warehouses that have to be indoor? They can't be greenhouses. So I have to find a neighborhood, a place where people are willing to rent to me or willing to sell to me. It has to be big enough, but it has to be well enough located so that I can get my product to my retailers. So, and you can't have inter-island transport either. So it's all on one island. All has to take place on one island, whatever island you get the license.
This is all in the statute.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so okay, let's assume you get some land and you build a factory and you this is a couple of interesting tidbits. One is, there's nothing in the statute, and nobody addresses where one might get the seed or seedlings of the plants. So
it's one of those mysteries.
Right, exactly. So basically, the state is going to say, all right, you do this thing, but we don't want to know anything about how you actually accomplish this thing.
That's funny.
That's one thing. And the second thing is they limit the number of plants, but they don't explain what a plant is. I mean, is a plant a tree, or is it a seedling? Or so?
Well, I tell you, I call up my cousin's uncle's brother. He lives on the Big Island. I go over there, I buy some seedlings from him, and I try to come back on an airplane.
You shouldn't do inter-island, though.
At the risk of being arrested and thrown in prison, I got to bring it back. How else are they going to do this?
No, that's the only way. It's the only way. So then you have your production facilities, and there is a high level, and I'm not even that well versed in the level of compliance that's required for the federal government with respect to how much you grow, how much you sell, how much waste you have. They monitor it very carefully because there's a concern that this material is going to get on the black market. They want to be sure that it is regulated, that it's regulated, an actual regulated
Let me understand
industry.
that. So the worry they have, they meaning I suppose the Department of Health, is that something falls off the truck.
Exactly.
And it gets sold.
That's exactly right.
And they want some kind of accountability so that the amount you start with and the amount you finish with
That's right.
is the same.
Right.
And nothing falls off the truck.
Right. So you'll have to get qualified, and maybe from another state, a qualified compliance officer who, and you know, of course, since this is state or federal compliance, it's arcane, it's complex, it's, you know, to manage. So just finding a person who knows the rules well enough is like the first problem one of my clients would face. Then also, you know, hiring people to work in the facilities and whether choices you have to make with respect to whom you want to hire, and could they have misdemeanor, let's say, on their record or something like this. I mean, that's an issue too.
Could they?
They could.
But not a felony.
Well, in order to make the application, you can't have a felony on your record. With respect to hiring, I'm not so sure the law is so granular that they've addressed exactly that issue.
Yeah.
They have addressed a few issues. Before the state right now is a bill which will address the plant issue, will address the inter-island, because you can't transport this stuff inter-island, which is a problem if you want to have it tested in another island. If you're in Kauai and there's no medical marijuana testing facility there, you're out of luck. So you can't transport it between islands.
Maybe the lesson of this is that I need to have my cousin's uncle establish a laboratory company.
Well,
We'd like to use you as counsel again.
that would be, yeah.
But the question is does that require a license too, to have a testing facility?
No, I think it would be just a lab. I don't think it'd be uniquely a medical marijuana lab. I mean,
You're not selling medical marijuana.
No,
you're really
you're
testing it.
you're a scientist, and you're testing the product. So
there's money in that.
I'm not that. I have to say, I'm conversant with the corporate. I'm not so conversant with the production of the material.
We're all going to learn a lot about this.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I mean, I can help you structure your company so that, you know, you'll have the right amount of officers and a board that will run things, an advisory board that will help you, but as far as actually, you know, growing marijuana, I'm not a farmer. But we have farmers. We hired farmers. Actually, we hired farmers.
Oh, so you'd have the expertise in-house.
Right, exactly. We hired a group called ABCAN. They're from Canada, and they have several marijuana producing facilities. And actually, we represent another client who unfortunately I didn't speak to, so I can't name that person. But they have almost like a franchise whereby they go into every state and they set up exactly the same operation in every state, like a McDonald's kind of situation. So we're working with them to open up a franchise in Oregon of retailers. These are retailers only. I think that's a fascinating
But that's
idea.
happening. I mean, could you spend a minute or two to tell me about the national process, you know, the ebb and flow, the exchange of information and people? Because I've noticed, I told you that I moderated a cannabis program a few months ago at the law school. I noticed a lot of the people involved with the applicants are people who have experted themselves in cannabis elsewhere.
Right.
They come from other states. And they come here and they consult or otherwise participate, and I think the industry is, you know, it depends on that. It needs that. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, you can't get a master's in marijuana ag yet. You will be, I'm sure, able to. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. So, yes, I mean, we learned by doing. And we were very lucky that the Bar Association had a convention which they focused an entire day on medical marijuana law, and experts from Washington and Oregon and Colorado came and spoke. And yeah, that's the only way to learn. It's almost like a grapevine, you know, kind of thing. That's why the National Cannabis Bar Association is so important, because you want that cross-pollination among people, because some people have one piece of the puzzle, other people have another piece of the puzzle. There's no centrally located place where you can say, all right, I'm going to look to this centrally located place for medical marijuana wars. It's like, how did you do it? When you faced this problem, how did you deal with it? That's the point we're at now.
Yeah, so you have to network a lot.
A lot,
You
which
got to stay up with the latest
yes.
things. Yeah.
And I'm a proud member of Women for Cannabis. A happy International Women's Day.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And there's I think there are a tremendous number of women in cannabis, actually, in very high roles. Both cannabis projects that I've worked on have had women in key roles, key marketing roles. So it's a wide open industry.
So I come into your office and you tell me, well, let's see. I think you should do an LLC instead of a corporation, or vice versa.
Right, an LLC.
LLC like that?
Yeah, mm-hmm.
And it's a Hawaii corporation. You don't want to form a corporation in New York. That's going to create problems.
Well, you could probably form a Delaware corporation as long as, I think I can't remember now, just 51% of the members have to be Hawaii domiciled in Hawaii. I think it's 51. It could be 61. I don't know. No, it's 51.
Wouldn't there be a risk in establishing an entity in a state where it's not legal? I don't know.
I never thought about it. Yeah, I suppose. No, I mean.
For example, just yesterday, the Supreme Court found that if an adoption was valid to gay couples, adoption was valid in any state, or in maybe the state of domicile anyway, then it had to be respected, full faith.
Full faith, yeah.
Yeah. So the same here. I mean, if my corporation is owned 51% by Hawaii residents where it is legal, but the corporation, this is a lovely choice of law question, isn't it?
I know. I don't know that there'd be the interest at the state level with respect. I mean, I don't think the Attorney General at the state level would be.
Care.
Yeah, right. That's right.
It's the feds who care, not the states.
Right. No. Yeah. So, in fact, I think as long as they have that revenue, you're setting up a Delaware corporation or a Delaware LLC. They have the revenue stream from that. They're happy. That's fine. But yeah, we'll set up an LLC, and if there are investors. We'll draft a private placement memorandum, which is an explanation of the securities that they'll be purchasing in the company, and there'll be an agreement that they're investing. They'll get so many membership interests in the company, and that will represent this percentage of the company. And then there are active members that run the company. The officers run the company, and the board advises.
Just like any other company.
It's exactly.
The question is, though, that if I don't know if I'm going to get a license on April 15th. Right. So do I enter into a lease? That sounds dangerous.
No.
Do I take all the money from the investors?
No.
That sounds risky. Do I create the entire structure of this, ready on the Oklahoma land rush kind of thing, where, the moment the bell rings, I'm off and running, or do I hold back? What do I hold back?
We did as much as we could, but we didn't make any permanent investments in real estate, because under the theory that once the licenses were issued, the charge for real estate everybody wouldn't be speculating in real estate. So we didn't. So the Wellness Group does not have real estate. We also made the decision not to take investor money. We had quite a large investor from the Far East, actually, and they're waiting until there's an actual license in hand. But the group was able to have $2 million worth of investors just who wanted in at an early stage, and they were willing to risk some part of their money. I mean, they'll get some part back if they don't get the license, but they're willing to take the risk.
Yeah, you have to be able to wind it back somehow.
Right.
So that if you don't get the license, you can take it apart again and won't be, caught
right.
some way.
I drafted for that possibility in the documents, because the odds of getting license they're not very good. Not very good in your favor.
70 applicants.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
and only 8 positions on the islands, 3 here.
How
So-
much capital do you need to run a thing like this?
Well, the
I mean, I've
law-
heard lots of numbers. Some people talk about tens of millions. I really wonder if that's necessary. You gotta get a premises. You gotta build out the premises. You have to make that vertical, facility that you were talking about. You gotta
Retail
get
outlets.
seeds wherever you get them from, and equipment to process, but that's not tens of millions.
Well, my philosophy in advising a client is if somebody is offering the money, take the money.
Because you don't know what your expenses
Yeah,
are actually
right.
going to be.
There's just projected expenses at this point. There's no historical financial information, right? So who knows what could happen somewhere down the road. We were able to structure a transaction in which there were $2 million of the sort of friends and family round and $20 million, which might sound like a lot of money, but I don't think it really is a lot
Not here,
of money.
no. And I've heard numbers just like that from others.
Yeah.
Who we have interviewed here.
But everybody's just at the precipice. We tried to do as much as we could to get there so the company could be up and running, because theoretically you can be up and running by July if you're in a position to do so. So we tried to get to the point where we didn't make any serious permanent investments, but we'll be positioned to do so. So we're right on the edge.
Yeah. My old uncle used to say to me, it's better to be overcapitalized than undercapitalized.
Oh yeah, that's why I said I would never advise my company not to take the money unless there was some obvious reason not to do it. Yeah.
That's Maryann Sasaki. We're here talking about the intersection of corporate and cannabis law on community matters. We'll be right back. I want to talk about the larger impact of all of this, how it's going to happen going forward. You'll see.
Hello, I'm Stephen Katz, and I'm the host of Shrink Wrap, which comes to you live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. on thinktechhawaii.com, and then it's repeated again whenever you want if you go to the website. On our show, we will be talking to all different kinds of therapists, psychologists, psychoanalysts, psychiatrists, people who talk about the mind, the brain, and about different ways to find happiness. I myself am a marriage and family therapist in practice here in Hawaii, and I hope you will join us because I've got a lot to learn, you've got a lot to learn, and it's a great ride. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
I think it's
Okay, we're back. We're live with Maryann Sasaki talking about the intersection that's coming soon, April 15th, of corporate and cannabis law. And wow, it's very exciting. So I get my application passed, my hypothetical case study. Now I really have to rush because if I want to make that July date, that's not you can't
feasible,
do it,
really.
Can't do it.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody that's thinking about July, I presume, already has structures and is already started to build. And although nobody has that kind of, I hope nobody has that kind of insight into who's going to actually get it.
I hope so.
Yeah, right. So our financial people thought it would take about a year before we could actually be producing and selling the product. And I think they thought that within 3, it would actually be profit. There'd be a profit. They'd make a profit? So
one of the questions I've asked a number of times, and I don't have any answer yet, is how much will it cost? I get my prescription, and I go down there. I negotiate where I determine with the help of the dispensary what I really need on that prescription. What's it going to cost me?
I have to say I don't really know the answer to that question. I want to say about $200 an ounce, but I'm not positive.
What's the street cost of $200 an ounce?
You're haven't.
We've both been good in our lives. We don't know from the street cost.
But the state has a real interest in regulating the price, and once again, not being undermined by the black market and not being undersold by the black market. So that's a big concern, to keep the costs low enough so that people don't turn to
Black market,
right.
if there's a significant. But one guy said in in the program we had in law school that the quality of what you would get
Oh,
in a
it's-
legal dispensary is infinitely better.
Infinitely
And
better.
safer and healthier and all
Yeah,
that.
well, look, it's being grown in a sterile environment, like it's not, outside where the dog can, whatever.
There's an image of it.
I mean, it's a sterile environment. They're quantifying each plant, each type of plant. It's really a wholly different product, I think, than rolling your own. It's a serious product. I went to a seminar where a woman talked about various strains being used for various diseases. Now, I'm not an expert in that for sure, but I thought it was fascinating that some strains could be used for like psychological trauma, while other strains could be used for physical trauma, or motor disorders. So it's a complex subject.
Yeah, well, we're going to find out here. And the funny thing is that, as much advice we get from all the experts come in from other states, we're going to find issues for which we have no advice.
Right.
And we're going to invent it right here.
That's why, when you said case study, well, I can tell you what happens up to the license. I've experienced that. Before, 6 months ago, I couldn't have, but now I can. What happens after license? That's a good question. That's a very good question. Of course, they're going to need all the things a corporation needs, or LLC needs, a business needs. They're going to need an accountant. They're going to need financial advisors. They're going to need a controller. But
a bank.
that's the
When
problem.
you get $20 million, where do you put it?
There's a couple of small federal credit unions on the mainland that are actually lending money, and I can't think that this bank thing will last too much longer, because it's just such an incredible opportunity for the bank. And really, what's the liability there? I mean, you don't really have any liability.
Yeah, I think they're over scared about it.
Yeah.
I'd like to bounce this off you on a national level. So we have several states already that permit medical marijuana. And here's another one, Hawaii. And there'll be more. And that's the trend. Clearly, that's the trend. And whether it's a generational thing back to the children of the 60s, passing it on to their grandchildren of the 21st century, whatever, the condemnation is gone, just really gone. And the federal government's stuck in something now. Just like that, thing about gay marriage adoptions. The Supreme Court is going to get a case on this. They're going to have to get a case.
Well, if there's a split in the jurisdictions, I would imagine, or
yeah.
somebody can't open one, and I guess they could take issue with that and sue.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean,
Choice of laws issue?
Yeah.
I mean, I bought the cannabis, or rather I had my prescription, I bought the cannabis in state A, and I drove across the state line to state B,
Right.
where they didn't have a medical cannabis law, so what happens to me?
Right.
And I mean, that's a problem, and the Supreme Court is going to have to wrestle with this. And really, honestly, don't you agree? It's kind of embarrassing that we have this kind of fragmentation in this country. Why don't we get together on it? Why don't we make a national law on it?
I
What
was
are we
going
fooling
to
around
suggest
for?
that's what you need. You need a federal statute, because, I mean, it would be the waste of judicial resources, time and energy. I mean, the amount of time it took with gay marriage, and how many different courts and how many people argued, and referendums and that would overturn court decisions. I mean, yeah, this really requires federal legislation, I think, in my view. It might be expensive at the outset, but I think ultimately will be a better use of scarce resources, scarce judicial resources, and
Otherwise, the Supreme Court's going to be busy, really,
Yes.
with a lot of these little issues
Right.
About choice of law.
Right.
But let me give you a prediction from me, my case study. So I win. I get one of those licenses. I open my shop. It takes me a while, more than July. It takes me more than July, and I find there are other people. Maybe they're more. They have greater alacrity about
Okay.
moving ahead,
Okay.
and they set the price, and they try to take as much of the market as they can before the other 7 come in.
Well, it's capitalism. I mean,
That's capitalism,
there's nothing you
yeah.
could do. I mean,
Yeah.
that's our system.
Yeah.
Unless the Department of Health tries to really regulate the price, and I don't know of any legislation right now where that's even being contemplated, but I assume that if it goes off the rails in some way and one company is dominating the market and there's not, I assume they'll intervene. I'll assume that
Because they want it to be democratized.
Yeah, they want it
everybody to get a
controlled.
chance.
Yeah.
Nobody dominates the
Yeah,
market.
like they want it to be like a pharmacy,
Yeah.
Equal access as a pharmacy. It is a pharmacy.
Now there are some people, I don't want to say anything that will surprise you, Maryann. There are some people who see this on a continuum toward recreational marijuana.
Yes.
And they, they may or may not tell you that. Some of them say, oh no, I don't believe in recreational marijuana, but others will tell you that it's all on the way to
I think it
recreational.
is. I mean, I'm a business lawyer. I like to see businesses succeed. I love when I know a business when it's a startup and then 5 years later they're flourishing. I like to help them get venture capital. For me, I think it would be great if there were businesses. It would, and I think that would be capitalism working in the best sort of way because you'd get the best products. People would be competitive. They'd be like, oh, the most delicious candies or the most delicious cakes or whatever the market bears. So I think, I look forward to the recreational, the day that it's recreational. I really do. I personally look forward to it.
Yeah, it's true. It's a realization of something. I'm older than you, but the realization of something that in the 60s, you really wondered what the problem was.
So covert. Why does it have to be so?
Why does it have to be so covert? I mean, and it was, people saw it as a real serious crime then.
Right.
And now we're realizing, and that's why I'm so concerned the federal government is not keeping up with things. So give us your sort of look forward, your impressions. Where is this all going to go in the next, say, 5 years? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I don't think it's going to be legalized recreationally in 5 years, but probably 10. And I do think that the early innovators, the people who have gotten in at early stages are going to they'll be very successful because in every state, the people who began at the outset with the law have become very, very successful, like this franchising company I was talking to about. So it would be disingenuous to say I'm only going into the medical marijuana dispensary business purely for the love of the people, and I want to provide this medication for people. I mean, it's good to do good, and it's good to be successful, be profitable. Those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. I don't think. Why should they be?
I'll give you one other questionable prediction,
Okay.
and that is it goes to the laboratory thing that we were talking about earlier. An industry requires more than the growers and sellers.
Oh,
It's all
absolutely.
the support organizations.
MIPS, marijuana-infused products. So you need people making MIPS, making product, however that is, by inhaling, inhalers, ancillary products. There's all kinds of ancillary services that are going to be required. We just don't know yet exactly what they are, but they'll grow around, just like the internet. We didn't know when the outset of the internet how it would grow, right? We knew it was going to be big, but
This will change things, don't you think?
I think so.
We'll have a different culture in Hawaii.
I think so. I think in 10 years we'll see a really different culture in the United States, and I don't think the federal government could ignore it for that long. I think they must address it, and I think depending on who is elected president, there's a possibility that it may be addressed.
And there we'll leave it.
No.
That's Maryann Sasaki of the law firm of Clay Chapman, Iwamura, Police, and Norvell, here talking with us about the intersection of corporate and cannabis law on community matters. Thank you so much, Maryann.
Thank you so much, Jay, for having me. I appreciate it.